In a time troubled by pandemics, climate change, and political turmoil, films like Joker or Parasite communicate complex themes like isolation and discontent. Today, studios and filmmakers have the liberty to make art that shakes our perception of individual reality. But the freedom to express the troubles of our times in art can't be taken for granted, even in advanced democracies. Up until the 1930s, the British Board of Film Censors had primarily concerned itself with political ads and sexual content. That all changed in 1938 with the release of a March of Time documentary called Inside Nazi Germany, or should I say, the lack of a release. The censorship of Inside Nazi Germany marks the first major act of international political censorship from the board. The film would have shown the British public for the first time fresh and relevant footage of the horrors happening in the Third Reich. This would be a stalwart admission to the public that another world war was on the horizon, and that letting Hitler annex a large part of Czechoslovakia had not, in fact, appeased him. The next year, Britain entered war against the Axis powers, and the government deemed controlling film content a patriotic necessity. The Ministry of Information was initially founded during World War I, but was disbanded after the war was over. However, 21 years later, entering a new war with Germany, the British government moved swiftly to create pro-British propaganda and promote a feeling of national unity. Though seemingly positive in nature, these messages helped to create a corrosive and stifling culture around Britain's treatment of foreigners and depiction of foreign countries. This also extended to the United Kingdom's art scene. Artists pushed back on those constraints to create monumental successes. Two filmmakers in particular made some of the most powerful and stirring art of the time and inspired generations to come, including directors like Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese, all under the Ministry of Information's grasp. Meet Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger. Powell was English born and bred. He was an experienced filmmaker, starting with acting and silent films. His early directing career was furthered by being a close friend of Alfred Hitchcock. Powell even suggested the famous ending of 1929's Blackmail, which was Hitchcock's first talking feature. Pressburger was an ex-journalist from Hungary who fled to England in 1939 to escape the rise of fascism. He managed to find kindness in a community of fellow Hungarians, refugee filmmakers, headed by Alexander Korda, the then owner of London Pictures. He was hired by Korda to edit the script of World War I thriller, 1939's The Spy in Black, directed by Michael Powell. That film began a collaboration that would stretch over 18 years and 23 films, with Powell serving as director and Pressburger usually creating the story, writing the script, and serving in the role of a producer. In 1940, the failure of appeasement policies and early wartime failures caused Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain to be replaced by the war-minded Winston Churchill, and the lives of the Archers, as they called themselves, took a major turn. As they were contemplating the subject of their third film, the duo was approached by Kenneth Clark, head of the Ministry of Information Film Unit and director of the National Gallery, proposing that the two make a propaganda film for the MOI. Powell and Pressburger accepted Clark's request. Clark suggested the team make a film about minesweeping, but the duo instead decided to make a film in Canada. Despite the MOI's nationalistic parameters, the Archers set out to make the best movie possible. Pressburger said, "Joseph Goebbels considers himself an expert on propaganda, but I thought I'd show him a thing or two." With the backing of a government that feared being the last stand against a Germany that now had control of continental Europe, the Archers teamed up with top-billed performers, all working for a voluntary half-pay, to make a movie that would complete Winston Churchill's primary objective to scare the pants off the Americans and bring them into the war. Performers like Laurence Olivier, founder of the National Theatre, and later a director of several of his own government-funded propaganda films, and Leslie Howard, renowned for his roles in Gone with the Wind and Of Human Bondage, joined the product of both with top billing. The London Symphony Orchestra provided the music. The resulting film was a thriller entitled 49th Parallel. The movie was an artistic and monetary success in its own country, inspiring many young men from the UK to join in the war effort. However, it was too late to achieve its intended purpose in the US. In December 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and the United States entered World War II. The film was an absolute victory for the Ministry of Information. As Winston Churchill took over from the disgraced Neville Chamberlain, Duff Cooper took over as head of the MOI. To match with the more active Churchill, Cooper began a violent flood of increasing in-your-face style propaganda. This change was criticized, with some saying that Cooper's tactics were akin to Germany's inhuman Gestapo police. One critic warned that the new approach was dangerously akin to the one we are fighting. Ironically, the 49th Parallel was seen as an uplifting alternative to the various other MOI campaigns. Propaganda is dangerous because of its power over how we communicate. Sometimes, like in the case of 49th Parallel, propaganda is well disguised and seems innocent. After all, films must be good entertainment if they are to be good propaganda. The Ministry of Information helped sustain national solidarity throughout the war, but it used methods similar to history's abominations. Disinformation as art convinces the public that the ends justify the means. Powell and Pressburger's next film, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, was a complex look at Anglo-German relations, stretching from the Boer War to World War II. It painted a more realistic and human version of David Lowe's famous cartoon character, bringing a satirical take on traditionalist British elites to terms with the horrors of the war. Everything about the film was revolutionary, from its inception, to its themes, to its use of Technicolor cinematography. The MOI tried to destroy it, citing the film's pro-German sentiments. When the Archers began casting, they thought the same star power that had brought them success in 49th Parallel. In response, they received messages from the MOI such as, "We advise you not to make it, and you can't have Laurence Olivier, he's in the Fleet Air Arm and we're not going to release him to play your Colonel Blimp." Winston Churchill himself took time from planning a national war effort to send a memo to the group dissuading them from ever releasing the film. The MOI used its power and influence to delay Colonel Blimp's release indefinitely, despite the fact they hadn't seen any of the footage shot for the uncompleted film. In 1943, they saw a rough cut, and finally, it was cleared to be released nationally. The Prime Minister personally delayed it from being exported internationally until August of that year. If the Ministry of Information had its way, Colonel Blimp might never have come out, and the world would have been denied its unique perspective. Stories of friendship across difference, for as long as they have existed, are pivotal reflections of our history as humanity. Though the Ministry of Information was disbanded at the end of the war, its legacy has inspired the works of authors such as George Orwell, Alan Moore, who critically depict government censorship on a vast, undiluted scale. From absurdist theater, which seeks to alienate its audience, to punk music that rebels against the socially acceptable, to even the alternative comedy displayed in something like Mr. Show, art has often become a battleground for what society defines as the rules. Stifling the ability of art to depict a world around it has proven to be the bonds that break a society's population. These dystopic predictions may seem extreme to some, but the experience of the Archers shows we're not far off from that reality.